If the thought of a difficult conversation puts a knot in your stomach, you are in the right place. Today, we'll share a simple way to make tough conversations easier and more effective.
Hello, and welcome to The Leadership Effect. I'm Catherine.
And I'm Camilla. And this is your space for honest, down-to-earth conversations about what leadership really looks like at work. No jargon, zero fluff. Catherine, you know you got to rail me in if we go off on a tangent, so we keep our promise.
I'm not sure who's the worst of us both, but yeah, absolutely. I will try my best. So in each episode, we will be bringing practical tips you can use straight away. Fresh perspectives on leading today and voices from the field to keep you growing as a leader wherever you are in your journey.
And our goal is to give leaders and organizations practical insight, fresh inspiration, and the encouragement to keep growing, even when leadership feels messy, unpredictable, and hard, because it is at times.
It is, isn't it? But since this is our first ever episode, I think it feels just right, Camilla, if we just share a bit of our own story and why we actually started Achieve CTC.
Yes, because the why really shapes how we see leadership and also the topics we're going to talk about on this podcast. Now, both Catherine and I spent quite a few years in corporate leadership and consulting roles, and we saw the same frustrating pattern over and over.
Yeah, I know. It was often all theory, no application, meaning we would see companies spend a lot of money in leadership programs, and the leaders would leave those programs inspired, buzzing with new ideas and ready for action. But then Monday would roll in and nothing would actually change. They were back at doing the same things over and over again.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it wasn't because the leaders didn't care.
No.
It was because they weren't given the tools and the systems or the organizational support to make that learning stick in their busy schedule.
Yeah. So when we actually started Achieve CTC, one thing was very clear. Our mission to work with organizations who are serious about building leadership capability in a practical, lasting way from the very beginning.
And it's not about that one workshop.
No.
It's culture plus structure. So it's about defining what does great leadership look like for this company, and then designing development pathways that is then weaved into that daily work so the busy schedule doesn't take over. And then it's about coaching leadership teams to perform together. And that's kind of how you strengthen the talent pipeline and make that change stick.
Yeah. And we've actually seen it in action. It's not easy. It takes hard work. But when it all comes together, the people side, the system side, and the strategy, that's when leadership development actually sticks.
Yeah, and it's not easy, right? Like you said, easier said than done. And we can talk about this for hours and hours, but let's get into today's topic. Because before we recorded this episode, we asked our LinkedIn network, what's the number one thing you found most challenging when you were a new leader?
Yeah, and we were actually really overwhelmed by the responses. So thank you for everyone who voted. And the winner by a landslide was having difficult conversation. What a surprise.
Yeah, it's not shocking, is it? But whether it's giving feedback, addressing performance issues, or navigating team conflict, these conversations are some of the most nerve-wracking parts of leadership.
Yeah, and it feels really hard having a difficult conversation. You can kind of like put it off for a long time, especially for first-time leaders, for everyone, but especially for first-time leaders. It's often the fear of damaging not even really properly formed relationship, or fear of upsetting someone, fear of making things work, fear of not being liked as a leader, or sometimes just a fear of not knowing when and where and how to start.
I think I've heard all of those reasons, but it made me think of this manager that I coached once, and she had a team member who consistently missed the deadlines. And, this manager kept hoping that it would just get better on its own. Obviously, shocker, didn't happen. But by the time she finally brought it up with this team member, she was already so frustrated. And this team member really felt blindsided, and trust really took a hit, not because she gave the feedback, but because she hadn't done it earlier and she waited just too long.
Yeah, and that is when you not just lose a team member, but also the rest of the team members become frustrated and maybe annoyed that issues weren't addressed earlier. And that is such a common story. And the longer you wait, the bigger the mountain gets in your head, but also the harder it is to overcome that obstacle. So you want to address it as quickly as possible.
Exactly. And we wanted to share a tool that we use a lot with the leaders that we coached, and it's called the SBI model. So the S stands for situation, B for behavior, and I for impact. And yes, we love our acronyms.
You do especially like your acronyms. It used to be a, a running joke between our team really that Camilla really likes an acronym, but this is one that we actually haven't created. It's one that's been created by someone else, but something that we like to really use because it's so easy.
It is, isn't it? And it's easy because also SBI, you need to remember one thing and not three, but it just gives you a really clear structure to give feedback without it making kind of personal or kind of
Yeah.
vague.
Yeah, it's quite easy, right? And how does it actually work? So, as Camilla said, S stands for situation. Here you really describe where and when the behavior happened that you observed. B is then obviously the behavior, and that describes what the person did. And you should be very factual here without any labels or judgment. That is really, really important to really avoid emotions getting unnecessarily high in an already difficult conversation. And then, as Camilla said, I is for impact. And this is where you explain how that behavior affected you, the team, or the work of someone you advocated for.
So I'll give you an example. So instead of saying you were rude in that meeting, because that can be quite loaded,
Yeah.
you could say something like, in yesterday's client meeting situation, you interrupted Sarah several times while she was presenting behavior. It meant she couldn't get her points across, and the client started directing questions to me instead. Impact.
Yeah, it's already so much clearer, and the person knows exactly what happened, and they can actually do something about it.
Should we give a couple of more
Yeah, I
examples?
think it would be helpful. Yeah, let's do it.
So, for someone who's delayed with their work, you can phrase the feedback in a way like this. In the last two sprints situation, your code reviews have been coming in 2 days after the deadline. Behavior. That's caused delays for the QA team and pushed back our release dates. Impact.
Yeah, that makes it not about the person, but it makes about the impact it has. And SBI isn't just for constructive feedback; it's just powerful for positive reinforcement. So when something is going really well, you can just say like, you know what? In yesterday's workshop, you summarized the group's ideas really clearly, which is the behavior and the situation. And you kept us on track and helped us agree next steps really quickly. And that is the positive impact it has.
Yeah. And I love that versatility of the SBI framework that you can use it for the positive and the corrective ones. And you mentioned ideas. So I just wanted to share a little story with a very positive outcome where I actually used SBI. So I had this high performer in my team, and he was technically brilliant, but he kept shutting other people's ideas down in meetings. Nothing malicious or anything like that. I think he just really got engaged in the conversation and he wanted to contribute, right? But it impacted the other team members negatively. So I used SBI to give him feedback about this, and I kind of framed it around collaboration, saying something like, in our last two project meetings, you gave really strong input early on, but then you cut off other people's suggestions. And that made some of the team members hesitant to speak up, and we missed some different perspectives.
And how did they take it?
Well, honestly, like those conversations are never super easy, right? So there was a pause at first, and then he had some clarifying questions. But we kind of worked through those, and I tied it back to collaborations, and the outcomes, like the business outcomes of this, and not kind of his personality or anything like that. So you could see kind of his shoulders dropped a little bit. And it ended up with him actually proposing a few things that he could do differently in those situations. So he proposed to do two voices before I jump in. So he had to wait until two more people spoke. And then if it was still relevant, what the thinking that he had, that he would share it. And then he offered to summarize everyone's ideas in the end. And, 2, 3 weeks later, more people were contributing and the quality of the discussion improved. And it was just really nice to see that him using his strength of ideas and summarizing everyone else's ideas in the end also made him do some additional build. So we got some really positive business results out of it as well. And again, like just the versatility of the SBI model is just so good. So I mean, you've used it tons.
Yeah.
What's your experience? Share.
Yeah. I feel like being German, I'm constantly told I'm really direct, obviously, here in the UK. But it also feels, therefore, a little bit more naturally to using things like SBI. And therefore, it comes quite easy to me.
You are I've seen you so many times, and yes, you're direct, but because you frame it in a nice way, in an objective way, it doesn't feel like defensive, like, or anything like that.
Well, thank you. But I try not to. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'm in a bad place as well, where it probably in my head doesn't come out
We
as
all
nice
are.
as I should be. But yeah, I used it a couple of times, and sorry, it's again a positive example, but I think it's quite a nice example. If I was responsible for a group of trainees, and there was one individual in there. He had so many great ideas, but bless him, he was so low in his confidence and super shy that a lot of people missed out on these great ideas and almost said to me like, "Oh, Catherine, I'm not quite sure. He doesn't seem to know a lot. He's very quiet," and it really impacted his personal brand.
What a pity, right?
Yeah, I know it is, but that's the reality of it, right? You need to speak
Mhm.
up with those great ideas and share those outside of just your one-to-ones, but in the wider forum as well. So I started kind of like warming him up because I didn't want to crush his confidence or kind of like expose it or pressure him to do more. So I would say when I gave him little tasks in meetings and said like, "Oh, can you summarize this?" And I would say kind of like, "Oh, in the last two meetings, when you summarize the conversation with a clear like two sentences summary, the impact was that we actually had a great burst of ideas, but also we found a miscalculation that we wouldn't have gotten when we didn't have that summary. So really, really well done." And I did similar those little nudges that really helped him to contribute more. And it was quite funny because after about 3, 4 weeks, people would come to me and say like he's coming out of his shell and I can see now where these great ideas are coming from. And it was so lovely. And you almost make a like a well done, like a little yeah, see him shine actually and use the SBI in a really effective way. So it was brilliant.
That example. And it's just
Mm.
so powerful to hear how you used SBI for that positive feedback and build his confidence
Yeah.
and then his brand, right? Because that's what happens when you change behavior over time in front of others, you also change your brand.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned like, after 3, 4 weeks, it's not done after one conversation. You kind of need to follow up and have another one.
Yeah.
And because
Especially
these
with the
things take
positive
time.
behavior. Yeah, absolutely.
But this was someone that was reporting to
Yeah.
you, right? So have you ever used SBI for someone who's more senior than you? It can be a stakeholder, an executive that you're delivering things to, or something like that.
Yeah, I actually did. And I had to smirk a little bit when you mentioned the previous situation where you dealt with someone shutting down your ideas. So a few years ago, long before we knew each other, I was working in a company that had a global talent development team, and I was part of the EMEA part. But we were all one team. We worked together on certain programs, and there was a specific more senior person than me. She was a director, was very close to the head of VP of talent development. So in a quite powerful position. Every time I worked with her, I felt so she was American, I was German. I felt she was almost because I'm quite outspoken and speak my mind, as you know. I always felt she didn't like that, and she was almost a little bit passive aggressive and would shoot my ideas down. So over
Oh,
time, I really struggled with confidence and almost didn't give my ideas or came away really frustrated from telephone meetings. And I said that to my boss, and she said, like, "Catherine, you need to say something, or do you want me to say something?" I said, like, "No, I don't want you to. I can fight my own battles." But I was like, even though I said that so confidently, I didn't feel it. I thought, "Oh my god, what will that do to my career? Like, what will it do to the relationship and to the rest of the team?" There was already kind of like cracks kind of like between them and us. And I didn't want that to impact everyone else. So I knew that I would have the conversation. I was just kind of like waiting for the right time. And then we had an in-person meeting actually where we did some brainstorming and some strategy work. And again, like in that meeting, she made me really feel quite frankly shit. So I thought like, okay, enough is enough. I need to say something. I was obviously super nervous. The night before I couldn't sleep. And the next day I did take her away and said like, could we have a conversation? And I kind of like described of what I was experiencing, similar to the SBI model, even if you didn't use it like that as such, but I did it very similar. And I just basically described how her actions made me feel and that we are missing out on getting the best ideas if she shuts someone down all the time. And I'm not saying that my ideas are better than anyone else's. I'm just saying kind of like they could develop to something else from someone else. And you know what? I was super nervous before the conversation, but actually it made a huge difference. I was glad I had the conversation. She was absolutely shocked because she didn't have any idea about the impact. She was very apologetic. We tried to find a way forward so that the next time she's in that situation, that they give her like some more information or a sign so that she doesn't do that herself. And it was great. Like from that point onwards, our relationship changed actually quite a bit. And also the way we work together that other people noticed. And actually we created the programs that we created afterwards were so much better. They were more because we were more open to each other's ideas.
Yeah.
And we knew that we wanted to get the best out for the team rather than thinking about like, oh, she's shutting me down, that is bringing me down, or she's malicious. It's not
Mm.
like that. So yeah, we just kind of like had a really good conversation, which I then afterwards thought like, oh my God, why didn't I have had that 2 months ago? That would have saved a lot of grief. Yeah,
That's often what happens, right? Is that you think a lot on something and then, you build up the attention, the intention? No
intention. Yeah,
intention. The nervousness, I
the
would say.
nervousness. Yeah,
And then when you finally have it, it's like, "Oh, that wasn't so bad."
yeah, yeah. It's like there's 99% of the conversations
Yeah.
that you have in that situation are, "Oh, actually, it wasn't that bad. I wish I had done it earlier."
Exactly. But what a bad situation to be in.
Yeah, it was quite stressful, but I think more in my head than anything else.
And I understand also kind of the hesitance to give feedback to someone more senior
Oh
because,
yeah,
it could impact your career in a negative way. So I'm happy the conversation went so well and that you kind of decided to actually have it. I wonder maybe we can share with the listeners how did you prep for it and what are kind of the pitfalls that our listeners need to be mindful of when they have conversations like that.
yeah. I think what really helped is that the situation just happened the day before, so it was fresh in our mind. I could come up with a situation, but I also wanted to understand her way and didn't say kind of like, "Oh, you did this and you were really passive aggressive and you shut me down." I was more coming
Yeah.
from a point of like, "Look, this is how it made me feel. It might have not been your intention, but was wondering like, what is your intention with doing this behavior?" And I came with a lot of question from a point of understanding rather than just kind of like attacking her, which then almost brought down her defensiveness immediately, and gave us a way forward. I also made it about kind of like a business issue rather about her personally, which
Mhm.
also really helps.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying, avoid vague situations, avoid judging
Yeah.
character instead of behavior, and focus on the business
Yeah.
impact
Yeah.
rather than anything else.
Yeah. Exactly. That makes a difference.
Yeah. And also, there's another thing that you mentioned earlier that I kind of forgot to highlight is that this leader actually didn't know how she impacted you, right? And how you felt about it.
Yeah. And I think that is really interesting because we often are very unaware of how what impact we have and what ripple effect we have. And you know what? No one gets up in the morning and think like, how can I make someone's life difficult? Or how can I make this project go bust? No one has this. Everyone wakes up with intention. I want to give my best today.
Yeah. And it's another example of kind of how this simple framework can kind of lead to such a good conversation, right? And such a impactful outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's put that into action. So if you're listening right now, think of a conversation that you've been putting off. Take a second, write down what is the situation that's going on? What's the behaviors that you observe? And what's the impact? What's the business impact of those behaviors? Just a few sentences.
Yeah. The secret here is don't script every single word. Obviously, you should get in prepared. So when I went into the situation, I had that in my mind the whole night. I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. It makes you very tired, especially if you're jet lagged. But go in prepared, but leave room for real dialogue. This because that is where the value is in. Listen more than you talk because sometimes you hear something that is completely changes your perspective and you understand the person maybe more. So that's what we call EQ,
Mm.
but we're going to talk about that another time.
Because I am so guilty as charged. So when
Mm.
I was a new manager, I over prepped. So I had like pages of notes that I like brought into the meeting. Like again, like, I wanted to do a good job as a manager, right? And give
Yeah.
feedback. But I was so focused on my notes that less attention was given to the team member in that session and to really listening to what this person said.
You just want to get through your notes and get your point across, isn't it?
Exactly. And again, not get there through them, but then communicate them to
Yeah.
this person, right? Conversations like that just went so much better when I stopped
Mm.
scripting and started planning just very simple notes that I had to touch on in terms of situation, behavior, and impact. And then building on kind of what you said in terms of perspective taking earlier, I also started prepping some coaching questions. Like if I give corrective feedback, it could be like, what's getting in the way? Or what would help next time? Instead of kind of planning this, speech.
Yeah. It makes such a difference, and really we want to prepare some of those questions and not really a monologue. It's not a monologue, right?
No, it's not. I mean, it's a dialogue, right? So,
Mm.
and don't put things off until you're at boiling point because having those conversations easier to be calm and relaxed. And the sooner you address something, the smaller and more productive then the conversation will be.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, if you don't address it in your head, you taking in someone, you make assumption about someone, it becomes so much bigger in your head that it gets harder to overcome that mountain that you make up. It's a bit like going to the dentist, right? If you deal with a small cavity now, it's quite quick and painless. Leave it for longer, and you might look at the root canal. And who the hell wants to have a root canal because it's
Oh my
painful?
God. What an image. But I mean, you're right. It gets bigger, right? It doesn't go away on its own.
Absolutely. So here is your challenge for this week. Pick one small issue and use the SBI model to address it. Keep it short, keep it factual, and focus on the impact. If you're really super nervous about using it in a difficult conversation, use it first to reinforce positive behavior because that's always easier. Everyone likes to give something positive. But don't forget to also practice it on a more critical issue.
So, how did it go? Did the conversation feel easier than you expected? Did it shift the relationship? So, what is it that you want to continue doing, stop doing, and start doing in terms of having those type of conversations? And that reflection is really how you build your confidence and your skills for next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, the first conversation is always the hardest, but it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger you become in it. And the more normal it will feel. So after a while, you don't use SBI in a very structured way, but it becomes more natural. But also people will see it as a role model and will be inspired to do the same. And it will be part of your legacy as a leader.
And also, when you role model it, your team might be might start to do the same, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's actually it for today's episode of The Leadership Effect. So if you found this useful, subscribe, share it with another leader, and connect with us on LinkedIn. The links are in the show notes.
Absolutely. And I don't think we went off on the tangent too much. But next time we will be talking about trust and building trust quickly when you are leading a new team with some obviously practical exercise, because that's what we're all about, that you can try straight away. In future episodes, we also will be doing some questions. That means this podcast is basically created for you to help you in your leadership journey. So we want to make sure that we're addressing your questions as well. So if you've got any question, put it in down into the comments or just message us on www.achievectc.com, or better even, our email info@achievectc.com. And yeah, let us know your question that you have so we can address them in this podcast.
And until then,
Keep leading with curiosity.
and with courage.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.